Yo, folks, how you doing? You know who it is, your favorite person's favorite person who happens to also be a part of your favorite organization. So happy to have you here as a part of the NAMCA podcast, and welcome as we have a really, really dope discussion and conversation with the one and only Maurice Nelson, who is Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the School of Nursing at Yale. Without further ado, wherever you are, clap your hands, stomp your feet. Mr. Maurice Nelson. Maurice, how you feeling today?
All is well, man. I'm feeling great. Glad to be here, man.
Awesome. You know, I did not tell you this in the green room before we started. I'm going to say it now because I'm secure in mine. I'm jealous of your beard. I'm calling it out right now. I don't appreciate you coming out such a well-manicured.
Listen, my beard and I, we both prepared for this moment.
I appreciate that. You know, they say doing it ain't bragging, so I understand. Thank you for readying you and your beard. And I told you before, I do want to do this. Just really quick, if you wouldn't mind, I know I introduced you, but right now I want you to unapologetically brag to me and whoever watching or listening who comes across this. Let us know just how amazing you are, maybe where you're from, what you've been up to. Spare no expense. Give it to us.
Absolutely, man. Well, just glad to be here. I'll tell you first that I'm born and raised, proud from Savannah, Georgia. It's a big part of who I am. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm very proud of that. And connected to that, I'm also a proud alumnus of Savannah State University, which is a HBCU. Extremely proud of that. I'm a big HBCU advocate and things that they do for our country, for our community, for the world, but certainly for Black folks. I also identify as Black and Mexican. Mexican is a large part of my culture. My grandmother's from Juarez, Mexico. So that's on my maternal side. My father's side is Black, African American. But yeah, so Savannah State is a big part of my my bragging. I always put on, because that experience was just very transformational for me. It's where I got so much of the experience and knowledge about higher ed that I have and use and carry with me in my professional journey now. From student involvement, SGA, I was the SGA leader at my fraternity. Got a shout out to Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Still actively involved in there. Oh yeah, and so. And then, just through my professional journey, I did graduate school at Georgia Southern. So my bachelor's is business administration and management. My master's is in higher ed administration, so a master of education, and I'm in a doc program now for higher ed leadership, so a doctor of education there, and I'm also a certified diversity executive, so I have a CDE as well. So yeah, higher ed is just it's my work, it's where I thrive, what I love, and it's not only I think my passion but my purpose. And so a lot of the success I've had is just really tied to those two, my passion and purpose really lining up with each other. And yeah, it's been great.
Thank you for that. Congratulations in advance on everything that's on the in Alpha. Who knew?
Right. I see you back there. I see you.
Oh, this whole thing?
Yeah. You see, I got.
I did see it. I didn't want to assume. I did see it. Appreciate you so much. So as we move on the conversation, was higher ed, was that your original journey? Is that what you wanted to do? Or is it something that you were involved in, found out, oh, I can do this?
Yeah. So my original journey was, I'll take you back. So I was a non-traditional student when I actually finished college. That's when I, pledged, joined the frat and all that as a non-traditional student. But originally, like fresh out of high school, I was big into fine arts. Like I was in a marching band. I played saxophone and a couple different alto, tenor, etc. So fine arts was a big thing, but I left school for a while, when I say a while, like 8 years, and then I came back.
Yeah.
It was a different experience then, because I was living on my own for a long period of time, and I wanted to do something that I thought was more practical and that could give me more bang for my buck. So I said I'm gonna major in business. I think that is marketable. I can use it in so many different ways. But I started to realize I didn't really want to work in, at least not corporate America. I started thinking, well, maybe HR, human resources, because I wanted to have a more personal connection with folks. But ultimately, through my undergrad experience, particularly being involved with student government, NAACP, I was president there and vice president for the state, chief justice with SGA, and then president of the chapter. It was a lot of work that I did, committees that I sat on, that I realized that it was a different type of advocacy, especially coming from the NAACP side, that I could do for people in this higher ed space, and that I really, really felt connected to. And it didn't feel like work to me. Like I would overwork myself, but I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel bogged down. Sometimes it was difficult, but it felt purposeful. And so that's really how I started to shift. And I started to make higher ed a long-term goal. And
Yeah.
then eventually I realized, no, it's what I want to do now. And so let me pivot and do what I need to do to kind of start building my way up.
Yo, amazing. Thank you for sharing that piece. And along the way, let's say, what's something you wish someone would have told you as you
Hmm.
got started in the higher ed space? And certainly as you begin to continue to ascend, throughout the ranks and so forth, what's something that you wish someone had told you, like as you were getting ready to hop in?
Well, so I would say that in higher ed, you really, and this is just from my experience, but in my experience, you really do have to kind of start um, entry level and really work your way up. You're not going to walk in the door as a director or AVP or anything like that. I mean, I think in many ways that goes without saying, but it really became clear that even to get your foot in the door, you had to really do a lot of things to nurture that co-curricular experience, such that this person is going to be good, in this space. And higher ed is broad, right? There's so many different
Yeah.
functional areas of it, but I wish I would have known how to better set myself up for that. But
Uh,
once I started to figure it out, then I kicked into overdrive, and it was at a point where I was able to do it. But it was, sometimes it was just serendipity. Sometimes it was me stacking things up and strategizing. But sometimes luck came into play, and I had to hop on at the moment. So just I would have appreciated just knowing that. Not that somebody dropped the ball and didn't tell me.
yeah.
Maybe I just didn't find myself or really express how much I was interested in higher ed to get that type of advice.
Awesome. And what would you say is the coolest or the best thing that's happened related to higher ed since you've been in there? I'm sure you've seen some things, heard some things, been a part of some, great accomplishments. Like, what are a couple of the best things you think have happened since you've been in higher ed?
That happened to me.
Yeah, it happened to you,
Yeah,
and it may be connected to someone else.
yeah,
Either it
yeah.
happened to you that you've been a part of.
I think one of the most impactful experiences that I've had in higher ed is my experience in working in multicultural affairs under the student affairs umbrella, and really being directly involved with helping in the development, so student development, moral development, just human development altogether of Black and brown students in a predominantly white institution. Because coming from an HBCU, I mean, because and don't get me wrong, HBCU is not a monolith, and
Right.
there's still that type of need there as well, but it's still different, and I
Sure.
think that uh, still stands. But it was the type of need and the type of sense of belonging that I was responsible for really facilitating and creating for that institution, which in total is about 27,000 students. My campus responsibility was about 18,000 students, 25% or 30% of which is Black and brown students. And so that's a large responsibility. And so having the opportunity to positively impact their retention, progression, and graduation, all of which is tracked and kept for the purpose of justifying dollars, state dollars that are getting poured into this, from grants and other state appropriations,
Yeah.
and really seeing our African American Male Initiative grow exponentially and become a model for the University System of Georgia in a lot of ways for how we operated in our annual summit that became a regional thing where students from all over the state and then the local general region could come and get development as Black men or African American males, was just a phenomenal experience for me and something that I just hold in high regard.
Thank you for sharing that, and also the growth that you So that's
Yeah.
an experience also, that's great
Mhm.
to see. Well, you mentioned Yale, obviously, and being at Yale. What's something, because, if you don't mind me, I know there are people out there that maybe feel like there's some, there's rumors out there, predispositions. People that having their mind made up about a certain place or when they hear certain schools. What's something, as you obviously being there on campus and then completely, part of their DNA, what's something that people might think about the institution that isn't necessarily true based on obviously you being there, your experience, where maybe they're getting it a little wrong?
Well, I'll tell you, before coming to Yale, I heard a lot. I even read a lot about how oppression just kind of permeates, like it's palpable almost. Like, you walk in and you just feel this cloud of oppression that just comes over you. I mean, I can't deny that there aren't things here that are oppressive. I mean, I probably wouldn't be here. My position wouldn't be here if that were not the case. But it hasn't necessarily felt that way, in the way that it was described and portrayed. And I've been in other situations like that too, where they're like, I'm going into a predominantly black. I previously did some work at a high school, college and career counseling, and they were like, it is dangerous. Make sure you lock all your doors. Don't leave no valuables in your car. And that just was not the experience, I mean, at all. And I would say the same here. I mean, I would, again, dare not say that we don't have issues that might align with some of those thoughts, but it's just not in the way that it was presented to me to kind of bear yourself for it. It's going to be rough. So you might, don't get lynched sort of thing. It's not to that extreme, at least not from my experience yet. I've only been with Yale now for 4 months, and I've only been on campus for about a month now. So, but
Got it.
it hasn't been quite in that way.
Still feeling it out. And, it's
Yeah,
also a testament to, taking your own, I guess, perceptions and thoughts into
of
play.
course, of course.
Like nothing beats the truth but a good story sometimes.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
that reminds me, I went on a few months ago, went on a tour of Atlanta.
Hmm.
And if you've ever been to Atlanta before, they talk about obviously the West End, underground Atlanta, and how it lost a lot of its traffic. Where you
Hmm.
mentioned was some of the story was it was dangerous, don't go there. All
Hmm.
these things happened, and it wasn't necessarily the experience, but that also led to, I think, Lennox Small got some notoriety as a
Right.
result
Yeah.
of people. So
Right.
anyway, it's all I just found me, because being in Atlanta now, I found myself saying some similar things without spending a decent amount of time in the very area that's being talked about. I was like, wait a minute,
Right.
experience it for myself. So thank you for drawing that
Of course.
conclusion. It's important to have that experience. Really quick, I'm going to just ask, because people may be wondering, we did this before. We mentioned
Yeah.
Alpha 5. People are like, what's that all about?
Yeah.
Well, what made you become a part of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and how has that, let's say, influenced you in the world of higher ed in your experience?
I'll tell you, it has had a tremendous influence on me in terms of my higher ed career and even trajectory. But I mean, I was influenced. I'll tell you. So going back to high school, we had at my high school we had the Kappa League,
Okay.
and I think everybody assumed that I would be a part of the Kappa League for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm light skinned, whatever. But
You probably had a beard in high school.
yeah, I
Okay,
did.
I get it.
I did actually. But I just didn't. It didn't appeal to me for whatever reason. I mean, nothing against the Kappa League or or the parent organization, but it just didn't align. But there was another high school, actually one of our rival high schools, that had Alpha Scholars, and that I just had a natural affinity to that. Like it just seemed like the purpose was different, even though I didn't know much about it or even about the actual organization that is Alpha Phi Alpha. But once I got to college and I really got exposed to the type of work that the frat was doing, both in the local community, but just at large, across the world. And then I started to look up to certain people in the community, not because they were alphas, because I had no idea they were alphas when
Yeah.
it became influential to me. But I would just look up to people for some basic principles that just align with my own, and then was come to find out they're alpha, and so it seemed like that many people who align with a lot of the ways that I thought in terms of how I advocate for the community, for myself, and just move forward professionally, align with that with our fraternity. And so I just did a lot of research on my own because I wanted to make sure was making the right decision. I read a lot of books, and I just paid attention. I paid attention to what the local chapter was doing, being the chapter that I initiated through Delta Eta chapter at Savannah State University, and then the local alumni chapter, and just the fraternity across the board. And what I wanted to see was whether what it stood for on paper in terms of this, the mission, the vision, objectives, all of that, and what we stood for historically lined up to what we're actually doing now. And when I saw a very good alignment, I said that's what I want to do. And then moving forward, it has influenced my higher ed career in so many ways because first of all, we have a lot of higher ed brothers in the frat. And so that's been a lot of tutelage and molding and grooming, and even a lot of the things that we do in terms of programming aligns well with the higher ed space. And so, it has allowed for me in some of my fraternity leadership roles to incorporate a lot of that into my practice too, in terms of higher ed. For example, the Canon Dozier project, which I've been a director of for the last few years for the fraternity, and risk management, things like that, and pulling from those experiences has been great.
Thank you for sharing that. Amazing. And moving on from that, because it's funny you mentioned not knowing that someone's a part of something. So the point, like, to pay attention. A lot of folks for you all watch, like, pay attention. You never know who's inspiring you, modeling yourself. There you go. Oh, okay, it
Right.
makes sense. That's super dope. That's great to know as well. For those folks out there, because as we know, this country specifically, let's talk about this country, is ever changing, ebbs and flows. There's media, there's television, there's social media, also all kinds of media out there. And I find that more people want to understand and learn more, let's say, about diversity, equity, inclusion within the guise of student affairs and going to university and school. What are some basic understandings you think folks might want to hear or know if they want to learn or as they want to learn more about what diversity, equity, and inclusion means?
Absolutely. And so I facilitate workshops quite often. And in one of my more foundational workshops, I talk a lot about diversity competency and how we develop diversity competency. And that is really our ability to successfully navigate the diversity that's around us. So all identities, not just cultural competency, which is good, but broader than that. And I think my biggest advice to people is to really understand and realize that it's a continuum. It's ongoing. Like, you don't reach a point where you've arrived and suddenly you are diversity competent and you have no other growing to do, because the breadth of diversity is almost limitless, right? And so it's an ongoing process, and we should always be willing to learn and grow. One of my mentors, Shed Dawson, always said that you're never growing, you're always growing. And that applies particularly to DEI, and understanding what those things mean. Like, diversity, equity, and inclusion are generally lumped together, but diversity is really acknowledging the differences that exist. But we can't acknowledge that until we really delve into the breadth of those differences, because then to be equitable and to be inclusive, you really have to have an understanding of what are we being inclusive of in terms of the people. And so I talked about HBCUs not being a monolith, because a lot of times those are accused of inherently being exclusive. Those are not diverse environments, but that would assume that there's no intersection between a majority Black people and any other identity that would fall under the DEI umbrella. And so really understanding that it is a process that never ends, and that we always have to continue growing in terms of diversity.
Appreciate that so much. And here's one, let's say, more specific to, let's say, who you are. Like, what's some advice you would give to a younger version of you? Because as I feel, I know that there are some folks that are either working with some folks that look like you, feel like you, or they are you. So or would like to be you. So what's some advice you'd give to a younger version of Maurice Nelson?
I would say at one point, I like to think that I always do things for the right reason. But I had to just be honest with myself and say, sometimes you kind of want a pat on the back. You want, oh, I really want that award or something like that. And truthfully, it could never be for that. One thing, there was an award that I was up for, and I know to this day, I know I won that award. It was, I'm gonna just be, and I'm a very humble person, but if I ever talk about that particular award, I know without a shadow of a doubt. In fact, I saw the scores. I know objectively that I won, but I was not named the winner. And somebody said something to me that stuck with me and said, "You're gonna earn awards in your life that you're not gonna win, and sometimes you're gonna win awards that you did not earn." And that just really stuck out to me, and I realized that everything that I did to earn that award, even though I know that I earned it and I didn't win it, I don't have the trophy sitting up here or the award. Everything that I did to earn it meant something to the communities that I was serving, to the students that I was serving. And so do it with altruism. It's got to be with altruism, because higher ed is hard work. A lot of times we don't make, the glamorous dollars that, that you're going to make in other areas. Sometimes the money does get good, but that's still after a lot of hard work, a lot of education, a lot of development and time. And so it's got to be done altruistically and with, a purpose and passion that's going to carry you through those hard times. And it can't be about accolades.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. And my last question, it's ever-changing world, and certainly there's activities. You mentioned Student Government Association, all the other activity organizations out there. And there are speakers, there are performers, there's all folks that would like to, or that they make their business coming on and speaking on campuses in person, or now obviously virtually. What are some associations you may be a part of that makes that easier for them or easier for you to find them? But beyond that, what could some of those folks do to be more attractive, to help themselves during a time like now, to be a resource to your campus and other campuses around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what helps me, I have people that reach out all the time, like, hey, I would love to come and speak for your institution and for your group. But I'll be honest, a lot of times, because there's so many. I mean, I appreciate also having like at least some examples, some footage where I can gauge, your level of energy, your level of understanding. I mean, because that's important. You can't just be energetic. You gotta give good information, right? So that is helpful, but sometimes you just don't have that time. And a lot of times I rely on word of mouth. Like I'm going to contact somebody I trust and say, hey, look, this is what I'm looking for. Who do you know? And so the power of really engaging with people, and even having a conversation. I may not be formally presenting to you, but my conversation with you, and this conversation is a presentation. And if I know that, for example, I was in a situation where I got the opportunity to get QPR, suicide prevention instructor certified, and I took it because I thought it was an important competency to have, particularly in Black and Brown communities. And so I did that as a double AMI director, or African American Male Initiative Director in the University System of Georgia. We would have directors meetings, and the overall director for double AMI said, hey, who wants to just share some takeaways from that training, if you went. So, hey, I take those opportunities. I can speak up and I can share, because number one, I did find value in it, and I did that. And I realized that this is not an interview, this is not a presentation, but it could have a profound impact on maybe even someone's willingness to engage in that topic. But it could have impacts that I don't even know. And what came out of that was a couple months later, an invitation to facilitate a workshop for the University System of Georgia's Momentum Summit, which basically is to all of the top 15 leaders of every public institution in Georgia. And so just taking those opportunities when they come up to genuinely engage with people and give a little bit of a demonstration of, hey, this is what I can offer in this situation, because that word of mouth. And that's what happened. Someone asked that director, hey, I need someone. Do you know someone who is dynamic, who knows the information, but who can engage and knows the system? And she's like, you know what? Yeah, I know someone because I heard. And that's how it happened. And so that's just my own small example, but I think that really does go a long way.
Man, appreciate that. Nothing but gems. Yeah, I feel like I'm on Clubhouse. I don't know if you've ever been on Clubhouse before.
Yeah.
So many gems. Poulter. Anyway, let's not do that.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. Any final words you have for folks listening and watching right now who are in the higher ed world who might need a pick me up? Because what we do understand it, like you said earlier, there's a lot of hard work that goes on there. It's not always recognized or rewarded. So what are some words, let's say, of encouragement or any last words you have for your colleagues?
Just really, you really do have to hang in there. There's a light at the end of a tunnel if you feel like you're in a tunnel. At the earlier part of my higher ed career, I sincerely felt like I was overworked, over relied on, and very underpaid and undervalued. And I took on more than I probably needed to, or was required to, but I also saw the value in how that would set me up for my next opportunity. And so sometimes I did overcommit to certain things, or committed to things that I didn't have to. It wasn't in my job description, but you know what, I'm gonna take that opportunity. And so when the opportunities did come available and they wanted you to speak to, hey, tell me, have you done a little bit here, or do you know a little bit about that? I could speak to that because I did it for free, on this committee or doing that in this time while I was overworked, but now I'm getting paid for it because I do have that experience, valuable experience that was genuine and that I could really speak to from experience and from the heart. And so hang in there, take opportunities that you can without overworking yourself. I'm not condoning overworking. I mean, self-care is very, very important. That's something that I had to learn. So also that's another piece. Leave the office, go home, detach, but come back and really put in the work, and the time is going to come and really set yourself up for the next step.
Man, Maurice, thank you so very much for all that. Golly, thank
Yeah.
you. I knew it was going to be a great interview. I don't know how I knew that. I had a sneaky feeling this would be amazing. So thank you very much for being here. Just hang out a little bit more with me. For everyone watching or listening to this via podcast or again through some social media outlet, whether it be Facebook, LinkedIn, this is going to be streaming on all those platforms indefinitely. So make sure you watch them while you can. And then obviously we're going to produce these on the podcast later in September. So make sure you keep an ear out for that as well. And in the comment section, we'll answer these questions as much as possible. So if you do have a question, make sure that you just put it in the comments and we will get to them as soon as possible. So appreciate you all for taking the time listening and also being a part of NAMCA and enjoying this particular podcast. NAMCA is the National Association of Masterminds in Co-Curricular Advancement, the #1 resource to get booked and paid to speak in the college market and the corporate market, especially if you want to have an impact and help your staff and professionals develop at a higher level. So that means you too, student affairs professionals, we are also here for you to be a resource like we just were. That being said, remember 24/7, 365, 4 days a year that you're good, you're great, and you're absolutely worth it. Have a great day. Take care. Peace.